In this video, we are going to compare pitch deck templates that you can see online because a lot of founders get confused with all the advice out there on which pitch deck template or format that you should use. As you can see, there's a pitch deck format recommended for 500 startups, Guy Kawasaki, Sequoia, Next View Ventures, Crowdfunder, and then the traditional Airbnb pitch deck. You could probably compare that also to the Uber pitch deck. And so a lot of founders once again, get confused as to what we should be putting as far as our slides. And as you can see here, there's so many different combinations and options for your slides. That's the reason there's this big spoiler here. There is no perfect pitch deck template, but there are ups and downs, ins and outs, preferences that you can take a look at. And I'm going to walk you through each one of them and tell you what I think. These are based on the best ones that I think are out there that are going to give you pretty much the general gist of what your pitch deck should look like. And by the end, I'll also show you an opportunity to see the way that I do pitch decks. My name is Ed Kang. If we've met before, use the chapter markers to skip right to the good part of the video. I made it as easy as possible for you. You are welcome. If we haven't met before, I'm a 7-time funded founder with 2 X's. And that's just a fancy way of saying I've failed a bunch of times to your benefit because I use YouTube videos like this and my channel to try and help early stage founders, especially those of you raising early stage capital, avoid some of the catastrophic mistakes that I've made while I've been raising capital. Not to say you're not going to make mistakes, but I'm going to try to make your life a little bit easier. I also work with startups.com where I'm the chief strategy officer. We advise founders all day. I myself have raised over $100 million for my startups, other people's startups, as well as startup funds. And I work with a team at startups.com that has helped startups raise over $750 million, many of them which have gone on to raise billions of dollars and have gone public. If you're part of startups.com, thank you so much. Appreciate your support. While you're here, do the YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you like this type of content. Let's jump in to the ultimate comparison guide for all the pitch decks out there. The first template that we're going to look at is the Sequoia method. You'll see Sequoia down here. I start here because pretty much everyone has taken a page out of the Sequoia book. It's quoted often. I have used this as a standard format, the foundation for the type of pitch decks that I use. And Sequoia, biggest game in town. There's a reason everybody likes their pitch deck format and everybody tries to copy it. As you can see, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 slides. Pretty straightforward, simple, 10 slides. And that's the first thing that you should really learn is that there are no more than 10 to 12 slides. I like to have 12 slides in mind, including the covers, the back cover and the front cover. And therefore, for those of you doing pitch decks and you've got 15, 30 slides, that is out for what is an introductory screener pitch deck. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we move along, but you don't need anything more really than the 12 slides, the 10 slides, and you're going to see that general sort of recommendation across all the different pitch deck models. There will be optional slides, but there's a reason we keep it brief. Again, we'll talk more about this as we go. The first slide they have here is company purpose. Define the company business in a single declarative sentence. Once again, notice how it says single declarative sentence. So many founders put a wall of text. You've got a wall of text that's assaulting the eyeballs here that the investor is never going to read. Can you put your company business, define it, the purpose, in a single declarative sentence? And that's going to be the theme throughout the rest of this as well, that I recommend that you have what's called a stark sentence right up at the top. A summary sentence, I like to call it the headline sentence, that tells the investor what they need to know. And so Sequoia pretty much started this whole trend, and I would recommend figuring out. Normally, founders really struggle with this, so that's the reason I always say use ChatGPT. Say, hey, can you take my whole slide, all my information, and put it into a single sentence that's declarative, that explains the company purpose that an investor would want to know? That's my advice. The one critique that I have here is that you could put the company purpose right on the cover, and that saves you a lot of space because typically startup decks will have a cover. So I would say incorporate this in the cover. That's my only comment, but I like having the company purpose. If you can't put it in one sentence, just have what your company does, a description. You're going to see other pitch deck templates recommend this, but that's my only critique or adjustment to this type of slide, the way the Sequoia method is telling you to do it. Next is the problem. Describe the pain of the customer or the customer's customer. Outline how the customer addresses the issue today. I like the way that it talks about the current state. This is going to be another theme that you're going to see a lot. Explain the current state, or what I like to say is the scope of why the problem exists. on what people or your users are doing right now. And I appreciate the way that says customers, customer. You want to talk about the customer always from the standpoint. And remember, the investor is not the customer. It's the customer is your customer. And so you want to make sure all your language points out to the investor's language in terms of how you know and you're talking about your customer. Next is the solution slide. Demonstrate your company's value proposition to make the customer's life better. I would indicate unique value proposition, so UVP, so make sure that you are standing apart. Show where your product physically sits. In other words, how is it differentiated in the marketplace? Provide use cases. There's a lot to like about these 3 points: your UVP, where your product physically sits, differentiation, and the use cases. I'd recommend doing one use case. Why now? This is a questionable slide for me, but I understand why they put this in there. Set up the historical evaluation of your category to find recent trends that make your solution possible. What's important is that the why now needs to really focus on differentiation from historical evolution. So if there was a solution that existed before, why would yours be successful today? Recent trends. These are inflection points that happened in the market. COVID-19 was a big inflection point that helped if you put it into your deck. The explosion of AI, the mass appeal of LLMs out there. Those could be really great things that you could put in your pitch deck. The why now slide, that's tough because the reason that I think it's not the best slide to put in for most founders, especially if you're early stage, we're talking pre-seed founders, because most founders don't know how to put together a good why now slide. And that's with most of these slides. They're going to work if they're good, but there's a trap. If they don't work, then it's going to hurt you. So you'd rather be harmless, not helpful. Don't put in too many slides to just throw it out there because, oh, Sequoia said to do it. You have to make sure you got the right information that's going to fit this slide. Next, market size. Identify the profile the customer catered to. Very straightforward. Calculate the TAM, top down, SAM, bottoms up, and SOM. You're going to see a lot of arguments back and forth in terms of top down or bottom up. TAM, there is a world where you can make your total TAM top down and you can say, hey, the entire industry is worth this amount. But there's also a bottom-up TAM that I advocate for, especially if you're an early-stage founder. SAM definitely bottoms up, and SOM is going to be what you realistically do. TAM, SAM, SOM, there are a lot of different resources out there on the internet to do this properly. Do it properly, show your math, but I always recommend TAM, SAM, SOM. Now, a lot of other pitch decks, they say, okay, don't worry about TAM, SAM, SOM, but I like TAM, SAM, SOM because it shows you know how to do your math on your market. What's most important is that you focus on the customer you cater to. You have to have a thoughtful argument of this is my customer. And that's the reason I like to put that customer in the summary stark sentence right up at the top. Competition, you want to list competitors and then list the competitive advantages that you have. There are 2 ways to do competitive slide, and you're going to see the format. You've got your benefits matrix where you've got your competition up the top and you got X's and check marks, and then you've got your magic quadrant, and there you sit right there. And that is where a lot of founders pick between these types. You got option 1, you got option 2, but you can also put a list and you can explain yourself through a summary sentence up at the top. But having competition, listing your competitors and your advantages, your differentiators, that's going to be key. That's necessary. Product. This is the lineup, form factor, functionality, features, architecture, intellectual property, development roadmap. A lot of VCs are going to ask for this development roadmap. When you are early stage, though, development roadmap, not going to be as important. This is for later stages, especially if you're in seed, because in early stages, they just want to know MVP, what the product is intending to do. You might not even have built it fully yet. So that's the reason a lot of times this is a how it works slide, but often a product slide, depending on your startup or what the product is, this type of information is going to be just fine. Business model, this is how you make money. So you want to say, here's my revenue, how we make money. Are we direct to consumers? Are we a marketplace? What's my pricing? The average account size, lifetime value, sales and distribution model, and customer pipeline list. Those are things that can go on your business model slide. Can you get everything in there? That's going to be tough. A lot of the stuff will go into the traction slide here. But what's most important is that you are explaining your revenue model and your pricing, and always recommend that you battle test your pricing. Just saying, hey, I think people are going to pay for this. Go out and ask your customers. But you have to remember, this is also a pitch deck that could be in the seed round or the A+ rounds, and they've already got this historical data in terms of the finances, right? And so that's the reason you can put LTV. You might not have figured that out. So don't feel pressure if you're early stage to have all this information on this slide. Team, founders and management, board, directors, and board of advisors. You're going to have a bullet list. I've got a better team slide coming up, but team is going to be important. Financials, like I said, if you are early stage, you do not need financials. If you're later stage, you can put all this in because you can explain by bullet point what your P&L balance and talk about the deal, the cap table, funds that you've raised before. That's a great slide to add to the end. Most likely the investors are going to ask you for a follow-up meeting if they like it, where you're going to have to present better details and show your due diligence room, and they're going to be asking for more financials. Let's make a quick note about the financial slide. If you have financial data, have a financial slide. But for early stage, having a financial slide, most founders mess it up. Remember I said there are a lot of useful slides which are great until they're not great because founders don't know how to use them. And most founders, when they do financial slide and they're early stage, pre-revenue, they just end up putting a graph that says, oh, we're going to go up and to the right and make $100 million and be a unicorn. Well, investors roll their eyes. That's the reason I don't recommend at an early stage putting those financials in there unless you're raising money and you've got 2-3 years of financial data and you can say this year we're going to go and make this increase and you can show actually it going up and to the right, whatever it looks like. That's going to be great. But most founders don't have the ability to put this great information at an early stage. Now, if you're seed, you're A+, you're going to have to put this information in. Now, let's look at this other format, this next one right here. I'm attributing this one to Guy Kawasaki. And there's mixed information, and that's one of the issues that I have with all this information out there. So I put this pitch deck guide out there, and they ended up saying it's attributed to the Sequoia method. But we just looked at the Sequoia method, and when I did a search for this image and this title, I came up with Guy Kawasaki's format. But then also he had a little bit of different format, but I'm going to use this one because it's got some really good illustrations. So take it with a grain of salt on where this comes from. Just understand that this is just one of these general best practice pitch deck templates. I urge you to read this right here. Let's read it. The purpose of a pitch is to stimulate interest, not to cover every aspect of your startup and bludgeon your audience into submission. Your objective is to generate enough interest to get a second meeting. There's something very subtle that you might want to look at in here, and that is a second meeting. So I'm going to imply that this is a meeting pitch deck. This is one of those pitch decks where you present and you're talking it through, which is different than a pitch deck where you send and it's one of these naked pitch decks. When I say naked, it has to stand alone naked, that you're not there looking over the shoulder, giving them voiceover saying, no, this is what I really meant. Here's the information that's missing from this slide. Don't be confused, etc. Therefore, let's use some of these principles here, but understand that a screener or an intro pitch deck that you send during outreach might look a little bit different, but don't worry. My last pitch deck template that I'm going to show you addresses a lot of these concerns. Just keep that in mind as we look through this template. Company name. So this is your cover. Add a brief product-focused description of your company here. If you cannot add a purpose statement like the Sequoia method, this is just as good. I would rather have you clear and concise. These are two words that you should lock in your brain for your pitch deck versus being clever. And too many times what happens is founders try to be clever with their purpose statement and they use buzzy and marketing slogans that have jargon in them just to be clever. That is not going to work for pitch decks. So that's the reason I like this here. Add a product-focused description of your company here. One line that's clear and concise. The same way the Sequoia wants you to put one line for your purpose statement. It's either going to be purpose statement or the statement about your company, a description. Then this deck says, let's have a company purpose, something big and stark right in the beginning. And like I said, you could easily combine it. Why waste a slide? But if there's something really big that you need to say, sure, it tells a story, sure. But like I said, these slides are great until they're not. So if you can make it work, sure, include it. Elements of the problem. Notice how there's no problem statement. There's just 3 bullet points. It says down here, sometimes the best way to explain a problem is with a list of points, but they don't have to be bullets. This is the functioning statement. They don't have to be bullets, and sometimes the best way. Here's the challenge that I see. Founders look at this and they go problem 1, 2, 3, and they present 3 problems that are so far out there. It's so big and broad that the investor really starts to question whether you can solve that or not. These bullet points really should be the details of one singular problem that you are trying to solve. Because the more concepts that you start to introduce, the more the investor is going to get incredulous and say, hey, are you sure that you can solve this problem? Let me give you an example. Some people say, okay, we're going to solve global warming, which is big enough as it is. And thereby, we're going to solve the energy crisis and provide lots of clean energy. And then we're also going to solve humanitarian issues such as inequality because of global warming and access to energy. Those are three distinct problems that are different business models unto themselves. If you're going to solve global warming, that's big enough as it is. What part of global warming are you going to solve? Is it going to be just energy, or is it going to be something different? And then adding the humanitarian crisis. So if you have way too many problems and they're all over the place, you're going to lose people on this slide. And that's the reason I really question the recommendation of this slide. But I understand that sometimes, everyone, sometimes the problem can be best explained with a list of points. I'm going to concede that I don't like it. I like the summary sentence right at the top, not the elements, and maybe 3 one-word bullets, maybe if you need it. Then you've got the product, and you got feature 1, feature 2, feature 3. Once again, I have issues with this bullet. If your product solves the problem in a very straightforward way, you can jump right to product features to explain your solution. That is so key here. And most of the time, founders put these features and they're technical and they make sense in the founder's head, but the investor has absolutely no idea what they mean. Think about in crypto, you've got, let's say, a wallet. We've got a wallet that uses this type of verification and it's a distributed ledger on this protocol. How's an investor supposed to understand that? And that's the reason, once again, I like to have a summary sentence right up at the top. And typically, this would be a how it works slide. It's a 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 to 5 steps that explain, all right, this is how the user solves their problem, especially if you're early stage. If you're early stage, that's great. Now, there is a difference here. If you got investors that are familiar with your space, then maybe you can get away with this bullet point list of features. But once again, I question the recommendations of this slide. Now we got a different bottom-up market sizing. Notice how in Sequoia method, we had TAM, SAM, SOM, and then they wanted top-down for the first point. This is saying go straight bottom up, which I don't mind this format whatsoever, because sometimes you start to see this type of format where it's got your TAM, SAM, SOM, right? You got your 3 circles, and sometimes they're beside each other like this, which is fine. But this is okay as well in terms of bottom up, because you look and you say bottom analysis can help investors understand the size of your addressable market. That's the purpose. Let's say you've got a app that serves gyms. You've got a SaaS for gyms. You got bottom up, there are 200,000 gyms in the United States. You can just say, hey, here's the market. Even better, you can explain, which is your TAM, you can explain if you times it, multiply it by the amount of money that you tend to charge, you can actually put a dollar amount in here. And then you got 4,000 gyms with multiple locations. That's why this is the segment. This is typically your SOM. Why we're targeting gyms with multiple locations, you want to explain it, because it's easy to sell them to. We sell to one main office and we can address the serviceable market. And then year 1 market, this is explaining in the first year, we're going to target 1,000 gyms with online class signups at $200 a month. Notice how right here, we've already got the number that's put in there. That's a totally perfectly fine way of doing your market slide. And sometimes different startups make sense for this type of format, especially if you can explain it super simple like this. I like it. I like this type of format. Nothing wrong with it. Historical context. Let's read down here. One way to answer why now is to walk through development in your space, either technical or market related, that make now the perfect time for your company. So instead of a why now statement like the Sequoia method, we're going to go through timelines right here and say, all right, so in the beginning, we had, let's say, web 1.0, and then that was social, and then 2.0, and now we're in 3.0, and now we're in the AI age. Who knows what you could put in there? But once again, this is separating you and saying, why now? That's something common, lifted from the Sequoia method. While at the same time, I see founders can't explain this very well in investor language. If it is clear start, let's say COVID-19 happened right here, and now we've got other things that are going on. Sure, investors might understand, but this is one of those iffy slides that I don't see founders pull off very well, but I have seen these slides go really well in certain cases. What sets it apart? Differentiation. Notice how it's not just statements, competitors and your competitive advantage. Now you've got this magic quadrant, or it's just basically 2-dimensional quadrant, and I've seen it work. Once again, let's talk about the different formats that you can use for this. You can use a competitive matrix like this, where you got your check marks and your X's. You can use a magic quadrant like this, or you can use this version right here, which is basically just an X and Y axis. An XY plot can be a great way to visually illustrate how you compare to your competitors, because you only need 2 dimensions. Where this, you need 2 dimensions, but 4 sides or 4 ends or ends of the spectrum to those 2 dimensions. But here you only need going up and going across. So this is 2 dimensional right here. And basically you can add more competitors and you can explain different notes and you put in there and then say us. The difference here is that a lot of times this looks like we're better than everybody else, and you plot it there, and sure, you can have advantages, but sometimes being better is not the differentiator. Sometimes investors aren't going to believe you that you're better. They're just going to want to know how you're differentiated, which is where you're going to use this magic quadrant, and then this tells you how many features you have or what types of benefits you provide that are advantageously different than your competitors. Different startups could use different types of competitive positioning, visualization. So make sure you use what you think works best. Sometimes I use 2. I often default to these 2 if it makes sense for my startup. Unit economics down here once again. Sometimes, there's always this word sometimes. And basically they're saying disclaimer, this isn't the end all be all. So remember that. Sometimes these pitch deck templates work. Sometimes these certain pitch deck slides are best for you and sometimes they're not. We're saying it's helpful to walk an investor through a typical transaction, demonstrate a relationship between revenue, costs, and margins. I don't mind this whatsoever. You just talk about here's the revenue and you explain how much it's cost us to get that customer, how much it's going to cost for us to maintain that customer, and then any additional cogs that are involved here, and then you end up with your margin. It's all right. It's straightforward, especially if unit economics are something that really differentiates you and you want to highlight that. For early stage startups, it's not as important. Once again, I'm going to say summary sentence right at the top. We make money charging a monthly fee, and then list your different fees and the pricing right there. And sometimes that's good enough. Use your discretion. Our leadership, you got team members and you got bullets. And that's what's missing here. Don't forget the bullets underneath here is a really critical missing component explaining this slide. Don't go overboard with the team slide. I agree. Only include members of your leadership team and other critical staff whose experience or expertise will be relevant to investors. Make sure that you put your experience right there and expertise. Experience and expertise, okay? I'm going to abbreviate that right there. What's missing, what I always like, put a headline up here and say, we've worked together for 10 years and took 2 companies public for unicorn. If you got that type of accolade, explain that and explain why you're going to win. Use this slide to really pitch the team. But as you can see, most pitch decks want a very clear team slide. And then you have financial projections. One thing, that's if you've got data and if it makes sense. Once again, I'm going to illustrate. Most founders say, here are our financial projections. And it goes like this, right? We're going to be unicorn right there. I'm going to just draw a little unicorn horse right here like this. Yay, we're unicorn. Investors do not believe that whatsoever. So that's the reason most look like this. But you see, this is a little more realistic. Most unicorns go like this. That's what they figured out. And they go up and to the right. After they hit this product market fit, they're usually in this trough of sorrow, and then they go up and to the right. That's typically what happens. But if you don't have that financial data, how are you going to describe that? How are you going to illustrate that? And that's the reason, if you don't have the financial data, once again, I say do not use a financial projection for early stage. But if you are later stage, seed, and beyond, you better have good financial projections. As you're already seeing, there's different types of advice and different ways you can skin the proverbial cat to present your startup and the important information. You want to put all these slides, these recommendations, these tips into a toolbox and then approach it and say, which tool is best for us to use? There will be contradictory advice out there. What I say may contradict things that you see right on the screen. But my pitch decks have gotten investor meetings. So have these pitch decks that you're going to see right there. It's important for you to make the decision on your own instead of saying, oh, you know what? Ed's the worst advisor in the world. He told us to do pitch decks this way. And then Slidebean or Sequoia or Guy Kawasaki told us to do pitch decks the other way. It happens all the time. I work with Will Schroeder. He's the pitch deck doctor at startups.com. People come and it's like they're trying to get mom and dad to argue with each other. And we chuckle about it. And they say, well, Will told me to do pitch decks like this. And then Ed told me to do pitch decks like this. What's wrong with all of you? And we go, yes and yes, meaning that we're just here to tell you what's worked for us, but there's no one single way. And that's your big fat disclaimer. Anytime you see my advice on how to do pitch decks, I will always give you that disclaimer. I am not the greatest advisor in the world where I am perfect. I think 50% of my advice is absolutely amazing, spot on. I just don't know which half is going to work for you. You have to go figure that out. That is your responsibility. But you see some common themes that every investor wants to look at, such as I want to see a problem statement. I want to see a solution. I want to see how the product works, the team slide. All that is going to be important. So look for the commonalities. We're going to show you this list once again, and don't deviate from them because there's a reason why they exist like that. So don't get clever and say, oh, I can figure it out myself, and I'm going to come up with a totally new way to do pitch decks. Stay away from that. Stay in these multiple lanes, these parameters, these boundaries that we're giving you, and you should be just fine. If you start to creatively articulate yourself and add a little bit of your own flair, that's fine. But stick with the generalities, get into the ballpark, the general area. And like I said, this is going to help you understand what works for you. And you can just repeat that over and over again, and you'll be your own expert in your own pitch deck and give other people advice. Here's the pitch deck format from Slidebean. And Slidebean, I really like what these guys are doing, mainly because they're YouTubers like me, and they're doing a great job. They're just crushing it on YouTube, and they've been pretty much putting out pitch deck content longer than I have, and I've used a lot of their stuff to inspire my stuff. I disagree in certain cases, as I just illustrated in my rant right before, but you're going to see this pitch deck format sort of tie everything together in a nice visual way. And there's a lot to like about this template. First, 5 to 7 word description of what you do, straightforward. But like I said, you could be putting your purpose statement right here if you've got a good one, and that's going to be just fine. What I like about what Slidebean did is they explain, here's some optional slides. So make sure you pay attention to the optional slide. I highlight them. Traction teaser. If you have traction and it is going really well, 20% month over month growth, 1,000 plus monthly active users, and you're showing that apples, oranges, pears, you're comparing them right there, and you're starting to see growth like this, put a traction teaser. I would also put a headline saying 1,000 people have begun to trust our solution 3 months into us launching. That'd be a great headline for this. So putting a traction teaser up front is great. If you have traction to brag about, investors love this. That's why I like the aspect of this being a teaser. They're going to ask a lot of questions. Right away, that solves a lot of issues or challenges in presenting your pitch deck. When you show traction, you're telling the investor, you don't necessarily have to understand this fully, but our users do, and we're selling it, and they're going to be super intrigued, and it's going to get them excited. Problem statement. Once again, problem statements are very common. Also called business opportunity. What pain point have you discovered that no other platform or service is solving? Keep this slide to 3 to 4 short statements that prove your understanding of the market. I would say 1 to 2 statements. 1 is ideal. 2 statements max if you have to clarify just a little bit. Once again, it's putting a nice summary sentence right over there. And I always recommend putting problem small and to the left up at the top. And then it says here, ensure that your statements are validated by data, reputable sources, not just your opinions. This is important. This is where founders go out and say, capital markets are broken. Personal finances are broken. That's just your opinion. You need data. And I always say, you're going to see me repeat this over and over again, size, scope, and severity. Instead of just saying millions of people do it, say 500,000 people do it the wrong way, which costs them $30 million in excess expenses. Don't even use percentages. If you say 30% of all Americans, just calculate 30% of all Americans is what? 100 million Americans? Explain that and be detailed, but make sure that you have not just facts and data, but detailed facts, exact facts and data, as close as you can get it. Sometimes you have to extrapolate your data, and investors are expected to do that. You can't just go read a Gardner report or read something on Google that you searched up or ask ChatGPT to give you numbers. Well, actually, ChatGPT is good at extrapolating numbers and pulling in different data and giving you this data to put into this problem slide. But this point is very important, and you're going to see this as common advice that I say throughout all my pitch deck guides. Then you got the solution. Now, this is where Slidebean also says, let's put bullet points in the solution. So you got 4 bullet points. It says right here, describe your product service in the abstract and how it does solve the one problem. I say, put this in your summary headline right up at the top, the Stark headline. Why not? Why wait for an investor to look at this bullet point and have it potentially get lost? Tell them what all this says with one statement right at the top. If the problem statement on the previous slides are questions, these are response to them. Great. And then it's got the additional points. I say, don't even put this stuff in there. If you can just figure out how to do this 2-part solution slide with one big sentence up at the top, I think you're going to win. The product, once again, we got 4 features in there. Is the same thing as the previous guy, Kawasaki, and the Sequoia decks. It says right here, speak of 4 to 6 key product benefits for the customer. Avoid technical jargon. I agree 100%. Focus on what the customer can get out of it rather than the technology itself. Customer focus. Investors want to know. You know your customers. And don't talk to the investors. Say, now you can save 15% on your car insurance. You don't want to use you terminology. You want to say customers, users, whoever they are, can now do this. rather than, oh, our technology is awesome. That means you fall in love with your solution, not the problem. Avoid obvious or expected features. Focus on functions that make you unique. So avoid saying everyone can log in online, or it's internet enabled. Don't say that. Just be straightforward and put up the summary sentence right at the top and say, we solve this. We are an app that allows users to do this because it solves this problem in 10% of the time. You'll see the way that I like to put problem statements out there, but this is a good detailed slide in terms of what you want to do, what you don't want to do. I'm just not a big fan of crunching it into 4 little mini bullet points that an investor has to go squint their eyes and read. As I always say over and over again, I'm like a broken record. Summary sentence up at the top. This is your headline, and it needs to be stark. And think of it like the ad for the ad. That's what you're doing, is you're saying, hey, this is everything that you're going to need on the slide right here in one sentence, and the rest of the slide is going to be amazing if you look and put your eyeballs on it and spend the time reading it. This is the product slide, and then combined with a market validation slide. I'm just going to be very honest with you. I don't know the validity or the purpose of something like this. It says here, use other companies or similar products to reaffirm how your product could perform in the market. This slide is especially important if your product drastically changes your customers' behavior. I don't see how this is the product. I see this as the why now slide if you're going to use that. That seems to be a common thing if you actually indeed have this type of data right there. Personal preference, I prefer a how it works slide for the product slide. 1, 2, 3, 4 step and explain it there. But you can choose to do it this way depending on your personal preference. Now we got another optional slide, which is the product slide, customer persona. And once again, I really question, but let's talk about these points. They do make sense to include it for sure in different parts. But if you talk about your ideal customer persona, that's great. I would technically put that in the market slide. This might be a great market slide or a way to do it, but I get a little confused with this. If you're a B2C company, focus on demographics and interests of your target audience. Be narrow and specific about who they are. That's the reason you go TAM, SAM, SOM. You can start to narrow it down right there. If you're a B2B company, tell us about the type of company that will buy your product service and who the decision maker is. Once again, these are optional slides right here. This one is specifically, I'm a little torn about this one, but if you can make it work for you, go for it. Business model, very important. This is how we make money. Here it says, talk generally about how you generate revenue. No need to get into the detail of each plan. Focus on your business model and your potential gross profit. Do not run estimations for the future. A lot of people put, we're projected to make $600 million. Don't do that. You can put a stark summary sentence right at the top. Let me explain this here, okay? Here's your summary sentence. We charge a monthly membership, and then just say, here's silver, gold, platinum. We can say we charge a monthly membership and it's based on the different usage or the amount of uses or seats that the user is going to have. And then you could add lifetime value as well as margins if you're able to do that. But if you're in the early stages, you might not have this information. So be very weary about saying something that the investor doesn't agree with. Just be straightforward. We're going to charge a monthly membership and we've tested it and we have customers ready to pay. That's battle testing your assumptions. Milestones and roadmap. This is a common thing. Again, especially if you're in development and you got customers, VCs are going to ask for this. And you've got a straightforward steps to follow. Just remember to keep them simple in terms that investors understand. So avoid jargon. If you're going to say we're encrypting everything and adding security protocols, etc., just say we're going to make things more secure. We're going to add another layer of security. Remember, investors will bring in technical experts to do due diligence. So don't flood this with stuff that people don't understand. Just put a roadmap that simply explains what you plan to do in the future and that you've got different milestones in your mind. You're not just going to sit back and passively wait for customers to come to you. Go-to-market plans. That's what I'm missing in the other slides. And I always love a good go-to-market strategy. I say this is very important. Here's the reason. These days, it is easier than ever to develop a product. There's LLMs, you can create wrappers. It's just so easy. Vibe coding, MVPs are launching in incredibly accelerating numbers. And therefore, distribution now becomes the battleground. Distribution is now fragmented. And that's the reason having a go-to-market strategy is very important to explain how you're going to get customers. It says right here, go into details about your single most important marketing channel. Single most important marketing channel, not a laundry list of we're going to do Facebook ads, we're going to go viral on Google, and we're going to do TikTok, and we're going to use influencers, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have salespeople, and we're going to have a newsletter. Don't do that. Have this, your most important marketing channel. If you're raising capital, you should have identified at least one promising channel, have some numbers around how to scale it, have some numbers. That means you should have already been testing. And that's what investors want to see. And then it says here, refer to no more than 1 to 2 additional channels you intend to focus on with the capital you are raising. This slide is not a list of every growth tactic you plan on experimenting with. Like I said here, do not put the laundry list. Too many founders explain themselves in a laundry list of go-to-market strategy ideas, and investors not going to give you money to do all the experimentation. If you've got one single most important one and you test it, well, then adding another 1 or 2 is going to be helpful so that you're not going to wait, because investors know one marketing channel isn't going to be enough in the long run, but they appreciate that you've established one marketing channel. Okay, here's your competitor, and this is the matrix. So far, we've seen the bullet list version, and then we've seen versions of the magic quadrant or the XY, where you're up and to the right over here. This matrix is great because you've got thing for pricing that's going to clearly differentiate you, and then you and your data, and then you got features. Now, what's important about these features is you want to make sure that your customers want these features. Don't explain something that doesn't matter to customers. Say, we're different because you're comparing yourself to your competitors. Your competitors have your customers, or they're going to go out and get your customers. So explain the features that customers want. And that's the reason that some investors say, we want to make sure that you have the benefits over here, not just features. Don't say that it exists on the cloud. Who cares? Customer doesn't care if they don't need it, or that's just taken for granted. Or you could say access that data across multiple devices because it's on the cloud. That's a different way of explaining it for a customer benefit. Once again, this is an optional slide. I don't personally think that this is optional. I think that you need to have this at any stage of startup raising any amount of capital, but that's just my opinion. Just a note on this, a lot of founders like to put in all this information right here and explain it, and that is one way to do that. But I prefer, if you can make this simple enough over here, you can put check marks down yours, and you can have X, check mark, or, different question marks here, and maybe a single note if it really needs to be substantiated, but making it as simple as possible that you have gone and understood your competitors, and you have one summary sentence up at the top. Again, this is a common theme, a broken record. Say, we're the only one that combine all the features into one platform. Or you can say, while other competitors are focusing on speed, we're focusing on experience. I don't know what you're going to say, but summarize up at the top, because again, it's the ad for the ad. You want investors to say, wow, this is a succinct, competent, and confident headline, knowing that the founder intends to win. Now you got your team slide, very straightforward. Once again, I like to see the summary sentence. We've worked together and we know how to win because we've taken companies public, or we've done 5 startups together, whatever it looks like, just so that investors know you didn't meet like over the weekend, a shotgun wedding during a hackathon. They understand that, man, you're a team that is gelling together. And notice how we've got different types of bullet points here. Focus on the founding team and the most important senior members. Don't put, the assistant, the person who does your social media editing. Don't put all the people there, just the main people. Make sure you have titles, as we see right here. Full-time people or part-time, indicate it very clearly. No need to list advisors or non-senior team members. The only reason that you want to list an advisor is if that advisor really moves the needle. I remember a startup had Deepak Chopra as a founding advisor. I said, put that advisor first. Include a short bio for each one of them, focusing on their relevant experiences in the field. Don't have a text. Short bio does not mean all this text. It means bullet points. So get the bullet points in there and use logos for social proof. That's another thing that really moves the needle. Once again, no need to list advisor or not senior team members. So we got Megan here, who's in marketing. Again, if she's just doing your social media or she's running your X account, don't worry. If it's the CMO, that's a totally different story, especially if they're on your cap table as a co-founder. Competitive advantages. This is where you're talking about your secret sauce. This, to me, can be baked into your competition slide. But if you've got something that's very unique and different, yes, talk about your secret sauce, but put it in a headline up at the top here. That's what I like to say. But talk about that secret sauce, but focus on what you understand about your current market that your competitors don't. You want to be able to say, I know something that they don't know. It could be in the form of technology, data, or speed. You can use these bullet points. That's fine. And if you've got something like you've got a patent that protects you, put it in there, because that's all de-risking the investment. That's part of traction or explaining how you're going to win. If it's an important part about how your product works, I don't mind having a competitive advantage slide. I just don't think it's absolutely necessary in every case. Finally, fundraising. This is a slide that was missing. Notice how there's no financial projection slide. This is where me and Slidebean, we definitely agree. But I always say, put this in the summary headline up at the top. This section right here, you want to put it right at the top and make fundraising really small. And it's always, we're raising X amount of dollars in Y time frame for Z milestones. See, it's the same thing here. This is where I got this advice from. Raising $300,000 to reach 10,000 MRR after 12 months. Straightforward. That explains what the investor gets for that amount of money. Provide round terms if other investors have already defined them. If other investors have already defined them, this to me is even questionable. I don't like to put that in there, but if you are hot and you are raising money and you want to just communicate up front, we're only using safes and we're at a 10 million post money valuation in our safe note with a 20% discount, and you just want to fill out the round because you've already got a lead investor and they're filling out those checks, great. But most pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-seed, early stage startups, don't put that in there because normally you're going to be wrong. You're not going to have the proper terms and you're just going to make the investor question whether you really know what you're talking about. Make sure the milestone you are targeting allows you to secure additional funding. That's if you are going to be raising multiple rounds, but don't say we have 18 months runway with this. Don't explain it that way because then the investor's just going to think, hey, wait a second, you're only raising to stay alive and to raise more money. Tell them the milestone that you're going to reach. So the milestone, or what I like to say is the inflection point, that is going to dramatically increase the value of your startup. So the investor says, oh yeah, then you're going to be able to raise another round. And our money is going to be worth more money because we're going to get an ROI because the value of your startup has significantly increased because of that inflection point. And then you have your use of funds. This is pretty much straightforward and standard. There you have your ultimate comparison between pitch deck templates. I looked at 3. I've shown you similarities, differences, deviations, and my opinions. If you want to know how I do pitch decks, watch the videos that I'm going to be putting on the screen. I've got the ultimate pitch deck guide for your beginner deck and all the slides that I explain and the way that I like them. I also have a playlist of all pitch decks that I've critiqued and reviewed. Watch those. You're going to like them. And you can always refer back to this list to see what slides work for where, what type of VC, what might work for you. A lot of information out there. Just remember, not one size fits all. There's no silver bullet. Learn how to do your own. And I look forward to your comments. Appreciate you hanging out in this video. I'll see you in the next one.